You know how it is. Keeping up with things is like a game of memory or some kind of puzzle that we're trying to solve. We see a thing and we catalog it. We put it on a shelf in our minds. And then later on, when we see something related, we put that on the same shelf until eventually we've got a collection going. What am I talking about? Okay, so a few years ago, I saw this video of an early iteration of the band Scary Pockets. Today, Scary Pockets is out there killing it. They've made so many videos that have gone viral. They're touring the world. But back when this video that I'm talking about was made, it was a pretty new project. Anyway, it was a version of the Radiohead song Creep, done as a funk tune. And they were set up in a studio that caught my attention. It looked like some kind of classic room, like maybe from Memphis or something. But I had never seen this place before. So I just put that on the shelf, you know. And then not long after that, I saw another video from another favorite band of mine who I've talked to for this podcast on multiple occasions. That's Wolfpack. And they were in that same studio recording with the great drummer James Gadson and the guitarist David T. Walker. I paid a little more attention. Where was this? I looked it up. Lucy's Meat Market in LA. Okay. So I started looking out for Lucy's Meat Market. Like when I interviewed Curtis Stigers, I noticed that the record that we were talking about had been recorded there. Joey Dosick makes his records there. Lionel Lueke and Gretchen Parlato's duo record from last year, that was made at Lucy's Meat Market. And they all have kind of a feeling about them. Like the room is kind of collaborating with the music and the musicians. Oh, yeah. And then there's this. Larry Goldings with Kaveh Rastegar and Abe Rounds. Man, let's just settle here for a second and listen to this. This was also made at Lucy's Meat Market, and all of these records were engineered by Pete Min, who sometimes mixes or produces also, but whatever is happening at Lucy's is kind of magical to me, and Pete Min is the guy behind Lucy's. Pete Min was actually a name I knew from another part of my life, from another shelf. That's the one that's devoted to making music for commercials. By the way, welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Pete Min and I actually had worked for the same music company. It's a music house, that's what they call it. One that hires someone like me to write music for commercials. So I was aware of Pete as a commercial music composer. But here he was, reformed, reborn, reinvented as the guy from Lucy's Meat Market, working on essentially a lot of jazz-adjacent hipster projects. A lot of my favorite stuff from LA seemed to be coming out of Pete's studio. Then I noticed that Pete Min had also started a label called Colorfield Records, and he was making extremely unusual art records with interesting artists like Larry Goldings, Abe Rounds, Anthony Wilson, Mark Guiliana, Brad Allen Williams, the guitar player and producer, and a bunch of people I hadn't heard of, like, for example, this Benny Bach record. But the Colorfield records were really something. They sound incredible, and the music is experimental, while also often very accessible. So I decided that when I was in LA earlier this year that I would go meet Pete Min at Lucy's Meat Market and then take the short drive down the road to talk to Brad Allen Williams about the Colorfield record that he made with Pete, and also about other things. And what you hear behind me right now is a track from Brad's Colorfield record. And what we have here today is the first of those two talks, the one with Pete Min at Lucy's Meat Market. Later this week, I'll give you the second conversation that I recorded that day with Brad Allen Williams. And just to paint the picture, on my way to talk to Pete Min at Lucy's Meat Market, I somehow managed to spill an entire full to-go cup of oat milk latte on myself in the rental car because, of course, my LA driving chops are down with the coffee and the multitasking, and I just got myself covered in coffee. So when I walked into the studio, I was cleaning myself up, and as I did, I explained to Pete Min that we have a mutual friend, actually a few, in New York. So at the beginning of our conversation, when he makes reference to Pete Nichelle, that's one of our mutual friends. But then what follows is really a very engaging conversation about approach, philosophy to making records, some technical things also, maybe more than a few technical things, microphones, synthesizers, setups, and there's also, as usual, a general personal overview of a life spent devoted to creating music. Third-story.com is the place to sign up, subscribe, visit the entire archive, which of course includes past episodes, like those with Wolfpack, Scary Pockets, Larry Goldings, Curtis Stigers, also Ben Wendel and Nate Wood from Kneebody, who have also recorded at the Meat Market, Adam Levy, the guitar player, Jake Sherman. They've also both worked there. I'm sure there are more. You can find that all in the archive, third-story.com. Support us at patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. And remember that we are made in collaboration with WBGO Studios. Visit wbgo.org/studios to find out more about all their award-winning content. Here's me and Pete Min talking it down at Lucy's Meat Market earlier this year. I first heard your name probably in what feels like another lifetime ago for you in New York in the kind of production music context. Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't mind, like, where did you come from? What's the story?
I guess started playing guitar when I was young, was into all the classic stuff.
Where'd you grow up?
From 5th grade on in Jersey, where Pete Nichelle lives.
Oh, really?
I went to school up in Ithaca, not for music, and then because my parents wanted me to go to
real school,
get a diploma, and then you could do whatever you want. Right. And so I moved down to New York.
So what'd you get a diploma in?
Sociology.
Awesome.
It served me well.
Yeah.
Throughout the years.
Are you being facetious?
I'm being facetious.
But there is something about, I mean, I think being a record producer is, in a weird way, has an aspect of sociology about
to a degree. I mean, it's made me more compassionate, definitely, about politics and people's situations and stuff like that. But no, I knew I wanted to move to New York and do music and be in a rock band and, you know, Led Zeppelin or U2 or whatever it was. Right. And unfortunately, that didn't pan out. So, you know, at a certain point, and I played in bands, I toured a bit, and then at a certain point was doing the grind, you know, did temp work, did day jobs, you know, all that stuff. I just wasn't, like, as a guitar player, good enough to just be right out the gate, like, I'm just making a living playing guitar in New York and paying
Session
my rent.
Guy.
Yeah, I'm just not good enough for that. So I did that stuff, and then Pete had started Duotone. Yeah. And then at a certain point, I was tired of being poor, and I called him up and I said, hey, can I, you know, start writing for you? Yeah. The first thing I did, I won. Yeah. And then during that time, maybe I did it for 10 years, maybe a little more than that, maybe a little more. And during that time, like, the work was crazy. Like, you know, I was doing at least 1 or 2 demos a day. Yeah. Like,
and is this
what,
like
day.
97, 98?
Like late 90s started, and then through 2000. Yeah. Through the 2000s. And, you know, it was just and it was union work, and, you know, you made pretty good money. Yeah. And I was always playing in bands. Yeah. Like, I always played in bands and always wrote with people and stuff like that. So I kept that dream alive.
Duncan Sheik was in this space too, right? Were you working with Duncan then?
I did a gig with him, and I think I played on a record of his or something like that. So I did a lot of TV stuff. And at the time, and around 2000, I also started a studio in Greenpoint because I always collected gear. Yeah. Like, I was just the guy in the band who always poured a studio, Tascam, D88s, you know, just the whole thing. I went through that whole thing and always collected gear, was always trying to, like, I was always interested in sound. Yeah. Like the sound of guitar. I always bought tons of amps and guitar, just trying to figure out why things sounded the way they sounded. Yeah. And so at a certain point, like by 2000, I had enough gear, and so I started a studio out in Greenpoint. Right. And continued to do stuff with Pete, but also started to, like, produce bands, do stuff with indie bands in New York. And then around 2006, I kind of, because I had been in New York for 15 years at that point. Yeah. And at that point, I was and that was like Guiliana, like in 95. And I was like, New York sucks.
Yeah. It lost the edge.
It just, it was just so different than from when I moved there. Yeah. So around 2005, a friend of mine, you know, he would always come out to New York, and because he was from New York, but he lived in LA, and every single time he'd be like, you know, you should move to LA. And I would, you know, how New Yorkers are about LA, like, yeah, right. And one day I thought, I'm moving out. And it was after 20 years that I had been in New York.
So since you moved out here, there has been, I think, a real opening of LA creatively. It seems like to me.
Oh, man. In the last 5, 6 years, 7 years.
But you're talking about way before that. You're talking about like the
2006
original New York LA dichotomy of it's like art on the East Coast and commerce on the West Coast.
100%. And when I moved out here, it was culture shock for me because I had spent so much time on the East Coast, and I just spent no time out here. So just as far as the culture, it was very different, and it took me a while to get used to it, and also realize that if you move out here, you just can't compare the two.
Right.
Like if you keep on thinking like, oh, this sucks compared to New York, you're just never going to survive, because it's just, they're two totally different places.
Yeah.
So anyways, I moved out here in 2006. It was very different than what it is now.
Yeah.
So it took a while. And also LA, what I've realized is that LA is you have to just be here.
Yeah.
And just exist.
Yeah.
And do good work. And then eventually stuff happens.
Yeah.
Like I know people sometimes come out here and they try to do that in New York, like kind of aggressive, and that it just doesn't work out here.
Yeah.
And I tell people from New York, I'm like, hey, I was in your position. Like, you just got to let it happen.
Yeah.
Like, it'll happen. Some people I see shoot up the ladder really quickly, but they're exceedingly talented people who they walk in the room, they're so good, you're just like, oh, yeah, that person.
Right.
Yeah. Few and far between. Like, 2 people I've seen that happen with. Unless you're
exceptional.
Yeah, exceptional. Yeah. You just have to grind it out.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of exist and just do good work, and then eventually it'll happen. And it's also just way more spread out, so it's not as concentrated.
And the networking thing is harder then too, right? You can't.
You're just not. It's just, when I moved out here, it's like, hey, where'd you go? Just for social, just for drinking.
Yeah.
Oh, there's footsies. There's this place. It was literally like 4 or 5 places. I was like, coming from New York, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
Where?
Like, that's it?
But you had started to allude when we were chatting earlier about that thing where when you're in a place long enough, people start to see you in a certain way. They see you as the guy that does this. And when you moved out here, it seems like you were able to kind of reinvent yourself.
You can reinvent, because I didn't know a lot of people out here, so no one knew what my background was. Yeah. So in New York, like, I was kind of known as a guitar player, even though, like, I'm not a great guitar player, but, like, I toured and I played in bands and, like, so when I moved out here, I was like, fuck that. Like, I want to be producer, engineer kind of person. Because that's kind of what I enjoyed. And I knew that's my calling. That's just my interest. And, I also saw lots of great guitar players, and I'm like, I got to practice a lot more, or I just keep on doing what I'm doing, and that's what I enjoy. And
what did you do? So what did you do when you got out?
So when I moved out here, I was still working for Pete, so I could still make money.
Doing commercial stuff.
But I set up a studio, and I just started recording people.
Yeah. Was it this where we are now?
No, I was in a house in Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
When I first moved out here, like, I would go into Hollywood and people would be like, oh, where do you live?
Yeah.
Eagle Rock, where's that?
Yeah.
Like, I felt like it was just a different world out here, 2006. And so I lived in a house. I set up all my gear. When I first moved out here, I didn't know a lot of people, and I fell in with a couple of people, this one band called Airborne Toxic Event, and I did their first record, and it, like, kind of took off and did stuff.
You wanna run away, just get on the fucking train and leave today, and it doesn't matter where you spend the night, you just might end up somewhere in a fight, caught in your room on a concrete shelf, fighting all alone with yourself, and you just wanna feel like a coin that's been tossed in a wishing well.
It didn't really do anything for me, really. I mean, some people, I got a little bit of work.
Yeah.
But I just set up shop and just started recording people and kept on doing the commercial stuff. But eventually, and then in 2009, I bought a place in Studio City. I made a bigger studio.
Yeah.
Got more work. I started working with Michelle and Degucello a fair amount, because when I moved out here, a friend of mine introduced me to Chris Bruce, who's a guitar player in her band, who has since moved to New York.
She's in New York.
She's in New York, yeah.
Lonely mother gazing out of the window, staring at the sun she just can't touch. If at any time he's in a jam, she's by his side. I'm so sorry I hurt you so much. Please answer my prayer.
But so I did 3 records with her, and through that, kind of, I got some work out of that,
right?
Just because she's so great and people know her and respect her. And also, when I moved out here, like I had a friend who was kind of hooked in with a certain group of musicians, and it was fortuitous because it was the people who I would want to be aligned with.
So what scene is that?
Like Chris Bruce, this guy Cave. It's just it's session people, but session people who were doing interesting records, not like the Hollywood. It wasn't Hollywood, like session people who, like out here, the music scene is small, but it's disparate. I mean, there's definitely different crews of people, and I know kind of more the East Side, and then there's like kind of the Hollywood people who play on, who tour with all those big bands who I don't know very many of those people.
Yeah, sometimes they come in for a session. And
every once in a while, like this one guy, Tim, came in for a Guitar Center shoot because I rent out my place for shoots sometimes.
Because you have a classic-looking live room.
It's just, it has windows, and so people like that. So this one guy, Tim, came in. He plays with Lady Gaga. I'd never met him before. So LA has that thing where it's like there's different groups of people, but in certain, like on the East Side, it's smaller. You just know who the people are, and because I own a studio, people come in and out of my place. So,
do you think that the visual aspect of the studio has helped it grow in the sort of internet age and the YouTube age?
100%. Yeah.
It looks good. It films beautifully.
Well, yeah, mostly when people walk in, they're just like, oh my God, it feels so good because, you walk into most studios and there's no light. Yeah. So it's just you're in a cave, and I care about aesthetics. I knew that I was going to be in here every single day. I like mid-century stuff. I like lamps. So I'm just like an aesthetically driven person. So I wanted it to feel comfortable for me, and I realized that it definitely affects how people feel. I'm opening up a B room, and it's going to be the same kind of thing. Yeah. Like I kind of understand what people like. Yeah. I mean, I just think in the past, like studio people aren't the most aesthetically driven people. They do it a certain way. Yeah. And I see a trend right now happening even with small studios that, people are setting their studios up a certain way. They're treating their rooms a certain way, and it has a certain look that I personally don't like. But, it works, and that's why people are doing it.
When we were talking, you showed me the live room, and you were saying, usually the people choose this one particular kit because it's got the sort of more Fleetwood Mac, dead LA West Coast sound. And it made me think, like, because I recognize a kind of sound that's coming out of this room, although I've heard a lot of different kinds of work, but I think there are certain things. How much do you think you're responding to what people want, and how much do you think people are responding to what you're doing, if that makes any sense? Like, do you see that there's people come in, they want a certain thing, and you go, okay, I see that there's a tendency to want to hear drums in a certain way right now?
Well, there's definitely, we're in LA, and I don't know if it's the same in New York, but dead drums are very in vogue. Yeah. A lot of people know how to do it. It's not that hard to do. Yeah. It's just I have, like, the way I set up my studio is that it's not like Capitol where it's you walk in and it's like, okay, set up. There's no gear. There's no instruments. I have everything set up so when people walk in within 15 minutes, we can be cutting. Yeah. But it's not fun for other engineers.
Do you have other engineers who work here sometimes?
Not yet. I'm going to start doing that when I open up my B room. Yeah. Because the thing is if I rent out my room and there's other engineers, I get kicked out of my room. Yeah. Because I started my label. Yeah. That's kind of my main focus. And if I have a B room, I can rent out this room. Yeah. And go into my B room and still make records. On your label stuff. Yeah, and still make records. So
I really believe strongly in this mentality of having mics up and gear ready to roll. That's how I like to work too. And I'm always surprised when I go to sessions where it's a clean slate and you're starting from scratch every time. I guess I understand it because it gives you a lot of choices.
Yeah, I think if you're a producer engineer and you want to control kind of the sound thing, I understand that. Because when people come in, they're like, hey, like I did it once where somebody came in, they sent me a mic list and a mic pre-list and a compressor, and it just wasn't for me. It just was not. I had to pull my patch bay.
Yeah.
It took me like, a day to set it back up.
Yeah.
And, I heard his stuff, and did it sound better than what was set up? Not really. It was different, but, did it matter? Like, it mattered to him. You know what I mean? But I just don't want to. That's not my. You can go to Sunset. You can go to a lot of other studios who will accommodate that. So for me, it's just it's for producers and bands who want to get a lot of stuff done in short amount of time.
That's what this is.
That's what this is. Yeah, I have a ton of instruments. So, and that's it. So that's my dog and pony show.
There's kind of a jazz adjacent thing that ended up happening here too.
For sure. I think Michelle.
Yeah.
I think that kind of, because I'm not a jazzer really.
Well, I can hear that in your background. There's none of that in the story that you're telling.
No, and I used to listen to a lot of it. I used to go to New York when I was a kid because I lived in Jersey, so I would just go into New York and go see the Gil Evans band.
Yeah.
And, I saw amazing stuff, but I just wasn't disciplined enough to like learn how to play over changes. Like that would just confuse I'm just not smart enough to do that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. But I think through Michelle's thing, that like that whole jazz adjacent thing started to come into my place. And so I get some stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have just the last year, Mark Guiliana has been in here, and Billy Mahler made a couple records here.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people. And,
and,
but when I look at it, it's like Lionel Lueke was here working with Gretchen.
Yeah, she did a record here.
That's a lot of big jazz names that we're talking about.
I think they like the studio.
Yeah.
I think if I had another ISO room for the grand piano, I would get even more work.
Yeah.
Because, with jazz, you just need tons of ISO.
Yeah.
So I have limited amounts of ISO. For certain bands, it works. For certain other bands, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I do like doing it because it's, in a day or 2 days, you do a whole record.
Yeah.
Billy's records were done in 1 day each.
Yeah.
Like I did 2 records with him, and, he's got a cracking band.
Yep.
Nate Wood plays drums. And, so it's just, they're so good. And so those are fun records because you don't get bored. It's not like, okay, guitar players doing overdubs.
Right.
Let's sit there for like, 2 hours while which I get, but it's more fun doing those records.
And what does it mean to you to start a label in an environment when the business of making records is like, first of all, so independently minded at anybody? Like, what does it even mean to have a label to you?
The label came out of COVID because during COVID, everything shut down.
Yeah.
And I had a studio sitting here and I have friends. And so I would call up my friends and just be like, hey, come over.
Yeah.
And let's just do music for fun.
Yeah.
Like, just because everything was so shut down.
Right.
So kind of early on, and I know it's not copacetic to say it, but like
you bubbled up in here.
Yeah, I had friends come over, and we would just like make music just on the spot.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And it was so fun. And one day I was here with my friend Eric Skirmahorn, who kind of was one of the people who got me out here.
Yeah.
And somehow, because I know a lot of people, like the people, my reach out here is pretty wide as far as players. And there's tons of great players who don't have deals.
Yeah.
And I have a studio, and I thought, I'm going to start a label.
Yeah. I
didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I just was like, fuck it, I'm going to start a label and see what happens. And so I thought about how to structure it, to make it fair for people.
Yeah.
And then so the first one I did was with my friend Abe Rounds, who's a drummer who plays in Michelle's band, plays with Pino. He plays in Pino's band, does a lot of stuff with Blake. He's one of the kids who like came here and went up the ladder very, very quickly.
Yeah. And it's got the project with Jake Sherman too.
Jake and Abe, exactly. So I did a record with him. He was the first person. And then I did a record. My second record was with Larry Goldings.
Yeah.
And the thing is like in the beginning, my label was not totally, like I knew what I wanted to do, but it wasn't totally sussed out. And, you know, within 5 or 6 records, I figured out how to do them. And basically the premise of the records is that people come in, no music. We're going to do everything here. And I kind of want to get people to get on instruments that they're not normally on, or put them in, just try to make music in a way that's not where they can't rely on their bag of tricks.
It's such an interesting conceit to take somebody who is really established doing a thing and ask them to do something else.
I think musicians are interested in doing other stuff. I think that sometimes it takes maybe somebody else to be like, hey, let's do a synth record instead of doing your organ record, you know, with your trio, which is amazing. I mean, it's incredible like that. And, you know, his trio is 30 years old and it's really a band.
Yes.
But I also think that like he understands synths, and even if he doesn't, like I'll get him on, you know, a buchla or whatever, a modular, some sort of modular. And I think that if somebody's creative, they're going to be creative on that as well.
For sure.
Right? Like if you're creative, you're creative. And the other thing is like when people are finding that stuff, like if you're sitting in front of something that and all of a sudden you find something, like I'm recording everything. That's the stuff I want. And we build off of that stuff.
And how did that process, like you had been producing records for other people in a different context before that. When you sort of cracked this code, how did you see what you were doing shift? Did it shift? Do you see a difference between when you're producing with somebody for your label versus if somebody comes in and you're producing on a...
Yeah, mostly I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I get called to produce stuff, but like mostly I engineer stuff and or mix stuff.
Yeah.
And producing is a thankless job.
Yeah.
Like, man, it's fun, but at the end of it, like if it becomes successful, it cannot be fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not like, thank you for, you know, it's like, I did this.
Yes.
And, you know, it's just the way it is. Like I understand it's human nature, but at the same time, you know, it's just, it's pretty thankless job. So what I realize, I mean, also like I'm older. Like I have a limited amount of years left on this planet, and I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And when I moved out here, I tried to get into that pop thing because my friend had a publishing deal.
Yeah.
We started kind of a production company, had writers come in, you know, and that's the way it is out here.
Yes.
Like that's a lot of the work out here is producers. They get together with top line people or artists. They write songs. Artists come in. They write, you know, 100 songs for their record.
I know.
You know, I'm just not good at that. Like, cause it's not in my heart to be doing that. And I realized that, and I realized like, I like doing art music.
Yeah.
I have a concept. I have the instruments and you know, like to get people to want to come in, you know, I have EMS. I just have tons and tons of things that are interesting. And so I know what I want to do now because I'm older. Yeah. And like I've done a lot of stuff that I wasn't good at. Yeah. And I realized like, oh, I'm not good at that because my heart's not in it. Yeah. Because the people who are successful at doing the pop stuff are real pop people. Like they're people who really love it. And I just am not that person. So I'm going the art world way and conceptually people can make records, you know, because I'm 10 records in. Wow. And 10 records out. And then I have another 10 that I'm doing. So I realize how like different people, because of this way I make records, it's very different for a lot of people. Like people usually go in and they're like, I want to make an 80s song. And then they make an 80s song. Whereas it's like, we don't know what we're going to make. You're just going to start making noise, and then it's going to tell us where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable, and some people get it right away, and the process is super easy. And some people don't, and then the process becomes kind of difficult.
Confronting, it sounds like, in a way.
It's a control thing.
Yeah.
Because you got to kind of let go of control.
Yeah.
And I think a lot, and somebody explained to me how, like, people who are kind of virtuosic on their instruments spend their whole life
Controlling.
Trying to control. But my feeling is that, like, it's true, but, like, no matter how much you know, it's limited. Any one person can only know so much.
Yes.
So if you want to access the stuff that's beyond that part of you, you got to let go.
It almost sounds like when I've talked to music therapists about what they do, they'll often put, I'm probably going to get letters from music therapists saying that's not at all what they do, but put somebody in a room with a bunch of different resources and let them try to express themselves with zero understanding of how the instrument actually works, you know?
Right.
And the process of dealing with yourself in the face of that new thing, something comes out, you know? And it's what you're describing is not that dissimilar.
It's not, because I realize that people's personalities come out in the process.
Yeah.
In a very big way.
Yeah.
People who have a hard time letting go of control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because they spent all this time, like, and they're like, okay, I'm going to make a solo record and I'm going to do everything. And it's like, first of all, I don't, like, if it's all coming from that person, then they can make their record on their own.
Yeah.
I want to introduce something that exists outside their brain so they can incorporate that later.
And are you playing on these records?
No.
So where is your intervention showing? I mean, I understand that part of it is you're putting in the room with the gear.
The computer. So let's say I put somebody on a 2600. I'm like, and I kind of show them, like, okay, this is an oscillator.
Yeah.
This is blah, blah, blah. You can set it up this way.
Yeah.
You know, blah, blah, blah. Go crazy. I hit record. They're doing stuff. If I start hearing stuff that I can, where I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Let me sit here. I cut up stuff. And then I'm like, okay, let's play to that.
I see.
And the thing is what I realize is that, like, because it's all instrumental music. I mean, some people have vocals on it, which is fine.
Yeah.
But mostly it's instrumental music. And what I realize is that for instrumental music, like, I don't care about ABA.
Yeah.
Form
is different.
It's experimental music. Yeah. So I'm kind of like more like, okay, sit at the piano and play for three or 4 minutes. Just play. You take that and then you take little sections.
Yeah.
And then you make them into sections.
Yes.
Because a lot of people come in and they play parts.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what everybody's like, play parts, be tasteful. And so if you play parts that are linear, then in order for you to have interest, you got to put something on top of it. Like, you got to put a melody or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, fuck that. Like, have everything that you do this.
Flow,
Evolve through composed. Yeah. And then you put less stuff on it.
And it's interesting, too, because it does speak to this thing that I've thought about a lot, where improvisation and composition are very tied to one another. Like,
totally.
You know, as a recovering composer yourself, you know that you just have to sit down and start writing something.
Yeah.
And that moment, act of creation, is an improvisation.
Totally.
And then you refine it and you edit it and you become tasteful, but that initial impulse is improvised. And so it seems like part of what you're doing is kind of playing with the space between what's improvised and what's intentional or what's edited.
I want what's in the subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't want it ironed out.
Yeah.
You can iron it out on your own.
But the records do get ironed out. I mean, for example, Brad Allen Williams' record is then dressed up with all these string arrangements.
And I'm a pop guy.
Yeah.
So I like the avant-garde, but I'm also a real and I like songs.
Yeah.
So I like to take that and to make that palatable for people to listen to.
Yeah.
So yes, there is. It's not like, oh, just play anything and then that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like it's sculpted, but it's sculpted chaos.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that like when people are doing it and it's just coming out, like that's the stuff that I'm more interested in.
It almost sounds like you're also giving listeners a way to engage with the avant-garde that's not so scary or unfamiliar in terms of the sounds.
I mean, I was in New York during the 80s and 90s, and like, you know, there were certain days when I would, you know, go see John Zorn, and literally it was completely out.
Yeah.
Just noise.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get tired of that personally. Like, it's just too challenging for my brain. But I think there's a way to bring some of that avant-garde, and a lot of it also to me has to do with sound.
Totally.
So if you have sonically something that sounds amazing, even if it's weird,
people can deal with it.
People can deal with it.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is like it's sonics, controlled, and kind of chaos at the same time.
But so if sound is a big part of what's going on, let's talk about the sound a little bit and like your approach.
So another thing that I like to do is like yesterday I had a friend over, we're doing a record, and he's amazing because he's 30, he totally got it. Like it's very easy to make a record with him.
Do you think that, but you know, by saying he's 30, are we saying that there's the younger generation understands this approach differently?
I think it's just personality type. I think it's just some people are just more open to having chaos be part of it and be comfortable with it, and some people are like, they really want to control everything. Yeah. So anyways, I had him, I'm like, so we did a piece and I started him on drums. He's a guitar player. Yeah. So I have that crazy kooky kit set up. Yeah. And I just said, just play for a little bit. Yeah. So usually I'll take it, his performance, and flip it onto my tape deck and then go down an octave. So then all of a sudden, it's a completely different performance.
That's one of your techniques is to do that?
Oh, I use my tape deck constantly.
And drop it an octave.
Or up an octave. Either way. Because I don't want people to think they know what they're...
And how do you do it? You record at 15 and drop it to 7.5?
Yeah, or whatever.
Or whatever.
Or go down 2 octaves, depending on how much they're playing.
Right.
If they don't play a lot, then I'll only go down an octave. But if they're playing a lot, then I'll go down 2 octaves. Right. It just puts it in a... You're just like, oh my God, it sounds incredible. Right. And just sonically... It just puts you in a completely different environment. Yes. So I don't want people to think they know what they're doing. Right. You know, because like once you do that, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's completely different than what I thought I was doing.
Do you want to know what you're doing or think that you know what you're doing? No.
No, I don't care. Yeah. The thing is that like out of all the pieces of music, so maybe I have 20 pieces of music, maybe there's 10 pieces that we haven't used of all the all the records. Like I know that no matter what we do, like if you just have faith and you just go, it'll get us there. Yeah. If people are open, it'll just get us there. Yeah. And you kind of have to have faith. I mean, you got to have faith in me that I'll just direct it in a way that it'll get us to that point. Yes. But it's rare that we don't get to a point. And the thing is that like, you know, when people write music and they're like, we're going to write a hit. You never write a hit. Of course. Right? I mean, it's just got to happen when it happens.
How long are these records taking to make?
So the way it works is like each sketch usually takes about a day. Yeah. Like, and my days are 12 to 6. Right. So 6 hours. Yeah. So we get a sketch. So that's 10 days, right? To get 10 pieces that like fit on a record. Yep. And then there's another 5 or 6 days to kind of just complete them, to go back and then and when we go back, sometimes they completely change. Yeah. Like, cause they'll be like, oh, this section sucks. Okay, just pull everything out, literally everything out, and just start again, just for the one section. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, oh yeah, I didn't really like that one, but now it's my favorite. Right. A lot of times that happens. So
click track, grid?
Everything grid, everything clicked. Most everything grid because I quantize. Because people aren't drummers. Right. And the thing about quantization is that like, I'm like telling everybody how I'm making my records. So the thing about quantization is that I like like electronic music.
Yeah.
But the problem to me with electronic music a lot of times is like if you have a hi-hat and it's just going and it's the same thing over and over and over, the shit gets super linear.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like if you're playing something,
it's got variety of dynamics.
It's got velocity changes and timbral changes depending on how you hit it. But if you quantize it, it has that real groove thing, which who doesn't like that?
And you're doing it elastic audio?
Yeah, just elastic audio. And it's fast. Everything is very fast.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about anything. Like I can sit in front of the computer and just make decisions.
Yeah. I
don't care. I just do it, and whatever the decisions I make, that's what they are. I rarely go back.
You move forward. You don't second guess it.
I never go back to other takes.
But that's where you're taking your contribution and applying the values that you're asking these other people to apply, which is like first thought, best thought, do it and move on.
100%.
How do you think? This is so geeky, but like, so if you're building tracks off of an arpeggiated thing coming off of a synth, then you later on find what the tempo was and put it on the grid?
I'll do it immediately. I'll do it immediately. Sometimes if people are like, I'll have the bukla.
Yeah.
Right? So the bukla is like, first of all, there's no pitch.
Yeah.
There's no time.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, they'll do something, and if it's a time thing, I'll go in and I'll try to get it close.
Yeah.
And then I'll hit quantize, and sometimes it quantizes right and sometimes it doesn't, and I don't care.
Because it's still subdividing in an interesting way.
Exactly. It's not like we're trying to get it into whatever. We're just hit quantize, see what happens. And usually I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. If I have to move stuff, I'll move stuff.
Yeah.
But like, so it's very fast. It's very not like, let's not think about it too much. Just as long as there's like a little hook or whatever it is that we can work with, that's what matters.
Yeah.
So, and then there's the tuning thing, which the bukla is like, I don't know, is it a little sharper? And then we'll just go in and then we'll pitch it so it's like in a pitch.
Right.
So it's 440 or whatever. Whatever.
You can play on top of it.
You can play on top of it, and it's not going to be a nightmare afterwards.
And what about mics and stuff? Like, I understand you say you have stuff set up. Are you changing your setup over time? Is it basically the same stuff always?
I have a couple of mics that I love using, and I don't care.
Yeah.
What I realize is that I have kind of all the big, C12, ELAM, 47, 49, but I have all that stuff, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Like even little Sheps microphones, like if it's going to pick up something, it's going to sound fine. And I push around audio so much that I don't really care. Like I destroy. Yeah. Like I'll just roll off all the high end on a lot of things. So it doesn't matter. Like to me, it's just like it doesn't matter.
But you're still also getting called not for your label. You're still doing work for other people.
For sure.
Do you change the mentality a little bit for that?
Only if they care about it. Hey, can we use a 47? Right. Okay. I got to turn my 47 on, and my VF14 might blow, which is a $6,000 tube.
So you're careful.
So I'm like reticent to use a 47 that I bought to have a 47. It's stupid.
It's like having a car in New York. We got a car in New York. I never want to drive it because I don't want to give up my parking spot. It's like you don't want to turn your mic on because you might mess it up by turning it on.
Exactly. I mean, I buy a lot of this stuff for, investment reasons and tax reasons.
Gear is a crazy habit.
Oh, yeah. I don't have kids, so it's easy for me. It's easy for me to go there. And I've been doing this a really long time. And what I've realized is if you buy the right stuff at the right price, it doesn't hurt in the long run.
Well, it seems like even though you don't care about whether or not you turn your 47 on, like everybody who walks into this room can feel that they're in the presence of like some of the most classic pieces of gear.
I care more about instruments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like microphones, whatever. Mic pre's, whatever. Compressors, whatever.
But so you have a lot of amps, a lot of guitars, a lot of keyboards, a lot of
keyboards, a lot of kits. Like, that stuff to me matters. Yeah. And I don't even think that we have the Yamaha out and I have a memory Moog. Yeah. And EMS, like I have all this fancy stuff, but like the little stuff is just as good. Yeah, as just as good as anything. Yeah. Like I don't really care what it is. It's just we should be able to make sound out of whatever.
It's a tool for expression.
Yeah, and if it's a crappy thing, great. Yeah. Let's make it not crappy.
How are you deciding who to work with on your label?
People who are recommended, people who,
So some people are coming to you, others you're reaching out to yourself?
Mostly I'm reaching out.
Yeah.
Mostly I'm reaching out, and I'm reaching out to a lot of people who come in and are like kind of player people, who aren't like, I'm going to make a solo record. And
well, I read that maybe one of the taglines was like, I'm interested in making records with people who haven't made solo records, but they're working a lot, or they have a lot of
they're side people. Yeah. And they don't think about like, I'm going to make my own record.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I think the thing that gets a lot of people is like, you don't have to bring anything in.
Just show up.
Yeah, like you don't have to write anything. Like it's like, oh, I got to make a record. Oh, I got to write a record, right? Like that's intimidating.
Sure, of course.
Like, and then you're like, oh, I got to make it amazing. Fuck that.
Do you see it as? I mean, this is a strange question, but do you see what you're doing as an act of generosity towards these artists?
I think that there is an element of that. Yeah. I mean, not to be.
No, you didn't say it. I asked the question, but it's like you're basically saying like, I want to open up your mind. I want to give you 3 weeks of my life for you to express yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the deal is, what the deal is. And I mean, I can tell you what the deal is. It's very simple. And
sure, what's the deal?
The deal is it's a 60-40. I get 60, they get 40.
But they're not paying studio time.
Right. They don't pay studio time. We split record costs because I want it to be like audiophile.
Yeah.
So we split the record costs. And I know a guy who works over at Blue Note who does all the 10 Poet series.
Yep.
And he'd come in here and I said, hey, do you have any like recommendations? I'm doing a label.
Yeah.
And he said, use my guy for mastering, Kevin Gray,
right,
who's amazing. And he does all of the Tone Poet series stuff.
Right.
And use RTI or QRC for record production, like for
manufacturing.
Printing. Yeah, manufacturing. And the records sound incredible.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. So we're definitely going for the audio file. Absolutely. It's like, hey, man, you want to hear if you want to just hear Blue Note records for the rest of your life, then you wouldn't be interested in my label. But if you want to hear Buchlas and 2600s and Moog modulars sound amazing with amazing musicians, like they're pretty interesting to listen to. Yeah. I think.
What do you think it is? I think that there's something. And Brad talks about it in some of the literature that he wrote about the record, or the commentaries that he wrote about the relationship with futurism and those instruments. Like those, so many of the sounds of the 70s pointed to a future, and now we're kind of in the future, and they point to a past in a funny way. They kind of they're evocative of like, they sound futuristic, but they also kind of feel like 20th century sounds to me.
I've read reviews where people are like, yeah, they sound retro, but they sound futuristic at the same time.
Yeah.
Which I want to push. I'm not a traditionalist. Yeah. Like I could care less. Yeah. Like there are enough people who do that stuff. I want it to push. I want to go forward.
Yeah.
I would just want to make music, not futuristic music. I just want to make music that I haven't heard before, or that I want to listen to. Just things that have different textures.
Yeah.
I like acoustic stuff with super like dig stuff.
Yeah. The deal, fine, 60-40, but you have to sell something.
Okay, so it's 60-40 split. We split the vinyl cost.
The manufacturing vinyl cost.
And we split the PR cost.
Yeah.
And the PR cost is 2 months.
Yeah.
So they pay a month, I pay a month. So, I mean, I float everything in the beginning.
Right.
And then once we get the vinyl, which takes a year, then I send a bill out. And by that time, either people will have sold records because the record has been out for probably, I don't know, 8 months before we get the vinyl, because vinyl takes a year to get. And so some people owe us very little money. Some people owe us more money because they didn't sell a lot of records. And then we have all the records. So usually it takes about maybe 300 records to break even.
Oh.
And then we have 200 records. And then so at the end, we could each make, I don't know, $3,000-$4,000
so
if
the
we
model,
sell all the records.
The model is based on selling 500 records and making a few grand.
Yeah, totally. I never recoup any of the money that I spend in here.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is that it's probably about $20,000 worth of my time.
Yep.
Like 15 days, and then I got to mix the record.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm not cheap here, like in my studio when I rent it out.
Yeah.
So that's about kind of what I think it's worth. So I get 10% for $20,000. If they want to pay me $10,000 and make it 50-50, I'm game.
Have you offered that to anybody?
Yeah.
Has anyone gone for it?
No. We're making art records.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to my initial question of starting a label. Like,
it's not to make money.
It's not to make money.
It's an art project.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm in the hole.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not making any money.
Right. So you have two big addictions. You have the addiction of gear, and then now you have this new addiction of making art.
Yes. 100%, and it's beautiful, and I love it, and it's my most favorite time in my studio is making these records because it's so fun. Usually, it's so fun.
Yeah,
there are times when it can get hard, but I mean, even
in what
with
sense of disagreements or
with people. I mean, even with Brad, like there were times where because he told me at one point, like I hear music in my head, I know what it's supposed to sound. I'm like, you should make those records on your own.
Yeah.
But your record doesn't sound. The record that you made with me, you wouldn't have made that on your own.
Well, there's that. That's an interesting argument.
No
right?
way.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah.
You already have records on your own.
Yeah.
Like this record sounds completely different.
Yes.
So I don't know what's that worth. Like, and so there has to be some trust in me.
Yeah.
In my aesthetic, right? That we'll get to a point where will make interesting music. Yeah. If they hear my records and they think my records are shit,
then they shouldn't work with you.
They shouldn't work with me.
Do you have a plan for the future beyond these records right now?
Not really. I'm happy making records just because I like making records, and I like making these records because I want my label to eventually, ECM's kind of a template, right? They have a sound.
Yes.
It's if you don't like it, then you're not going to buy their records. But
would you consider moving into? I mean, you said some have vocals, some don't, but would you consider like expanding the concept a little bit to more of a, I don't know,
like song thing?
Yeah, song things.
Well, the problem with the song thing is that it gets it out of the ethos of how I make my records, which is like, don't think about it, because once lyrics become involved, everything stops.
Yeah.
Like I've been in here in writing sessions.
Yeah.
It's like music goes, melody, blah, blah, blah.
And then what are we saying?
Lyrics.
Yeah.
Oh. And then everything stops.
And you're trying to keep it moving.
I just don't, and I'm not a lyricist, so I just like my eyes get, they glaze over when it goes into lyrics. And lyrics are so important.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. It's like, I don't want to just shit out like crappy lyrics. Like to me, it's like, what's the point of that?
Let's not do it.
Yeah, and you read books and it's like, wow, those guys really know how to write.
Yeah,
and then you hear songs and you're like,
that's
or
true.
Sometimes like, wow, they're really amazing writers. Yeah. But usually you have to sit and think about it, and like, so to me, that's the thing that I would like to try to do is actually like try to get somebody who is a songwriter and make a record that's not like, let's bring in a band.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to get them to make a record with their songs, but like in the same manner that I'm doing these records. So it's like songs, but the background is not a bass player, a drummer, a guitar player, a keyboard player.
Using this palette.
Yeah, songs, let's do the drums, and then let's go down an octave, and then see how it fits underneath your thing.
Right.
Like, so it's sonically like, whoa, which is happening. The Perfume Genius stuff is very adventurous.
Yes.
Don't hold back, I wanna break free, got it singing through your body, and I'm carried by the sound. Every drum, every single beat, they were born from your body, and I'm carried by the sound.
Do you have people coming to you? Like, are you being approached? Are you having to turn people down?
Not
yet.
Really.
Wait until this comes out, and then you'll see what happens.
I hope so. No, not really. Yeah. I mean, it's like, listen, I've been doing this stuff a long time, and like nothing's ever like, I've never done one thing where it's like all of a sudden my phone, it just doesn't happen for me.
If you have commercial work, if you have paying
clients,
you prioritize that.
I take that. It depends on how much I need. It depends on how much I'm working. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely prioritize that just because I need to subsidize my label.
Yeah, your habit. You need to pay for your habit.
I got to pay for my habit, and it's not coming from my parents.
Right.
I don't have that fountain of, which a lot of people do,
I know.
Especially in New York and LA. I mean,
it really has become clear to me when I see my peers who are really doing well that they probably didn't make that money. Like when I see in New York people who are living really well, it's like, oh, you maybe didn't make that money.
Yeah, or you're living in LA or New York and you're pursuing your passion without having to work or something.
Right.
And you're
which is also great. I mean,
I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not a judgment call. It's more like I just don't have that fountain of money, funnel of money coming in. So I got to do gigs.
You got to take the gigs. Of
course.
I
got to take the gigs. And gratefully, because of like the people that I'm kind of associated with, most of the people who I get are at least super talented. Yeah. I may not like the music, but it's at least good people.
I've always wondered that with engineers, like, you fortunately you always have something that you can focus on and listen to. The sounds can be
sounds. Yeah. If I don't like the music, I just go for sound.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to make these people happy because I'm going to make their sounds really good.
Why is it called Lucy's Meat Market?
Because
it was a meat market.
Oh yeah, in there, that was the Lucy's Meat Market. This was 2-bedroom apartment.
The live room.
Yeah, that's the live room.
Was filled with hanging carcasses, probably.
At one point, when I bought it, it was pretty shut down. But there were like display cases. There's a giant, refrigerator in the back.
Colorfield Records, that's what it's called, right? Why Colorfield?
To come up with any name is really hard. Yeah. And I was racking my brain, and somehow I remembered that there was like an art movement in the 40s. Mark Rothko, Helen Frankenthaler, like they were all part of this movement called Colorfield.
Right.
So I was like, that sounds good. And when I brought it up with people, everybody was like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's evocative.
So.
And I have one other question, which is like I'm kind of jumping around, but I think probably the first time I saw the studio on a video of it, the thing I noticed was the drum. Hut that you made. Oh yeah. How did you come to that? You've got this dropped ceiling, high ceilings, and then you've got this like corner for the drums.
I think it's United. Yeah. They have a thing called a drumbrella. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's literally like an umbrella that comes down that can
deaden the sound.
Yeah. And so I thought, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Because if I want a dead sound, it's just hard when
the ceilings are high.
Yeah. So I had somebody build it, and it goes up and it goes down.
Oh, it does?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so you can decide how high.
It's never been up.
It can go up, but
It can go up, and I've never put it up. No one has ever asked me to put it up because I have room mics. Yep. There's one Coles over there on the wall, and there's another Coles here. That room sounds amazing. Yeah. It's just an amazing, amazing sounding room. So if people want room sounds, they can have it. But if they want like super dead sounds, so it's a very versatile like drum. I give them a lot of mics.
So Cole's room mic's always on or always up.
Yeah, and there's a room mic all the way in the back. Yeah. There's an AEA mic all the way in the back. Yeah. And then there's an AEA stereo mic that's in the front of the kit, which is kind of like a near room mic. Yeah. So I give people a lot of options.
And then what's your overhead?
It's a C24 right now.
I love that on overheads.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's not rock. Like it's not a rock sound. Like it's a very clear,
smooth.
Yeah, it's like for jazz and stuff like that. Like I've done a couple rock things where I was like, oh man, I should have put a pair of 67s up or whatever, 87s or something like that. But it's just super easy. It's just, and I do MS. Like
really?
I do MS.
MS overheads.
Yeah, and
I was just thinking about that.
My piano, like I have that mic. It's not a C24, but it's a MS mic. Yeah. It's a stereo mic. Yeah. And the thing about it is that like I've had like a SF12. Yeah. Like where it's like that. Yeah. Right. And if you put it, right. So you put it in front of a piano like that. But where do people play? Usually people play right here. Mm-hmm. So you're
missing the sides.
Yeah, you're missing the middle. Like you're getting the spread, but you're like missing the middle. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna try MS on it. It was night and day.
I only do it for room. I've never done it on something close.
You get
from right over the kit, for example,
right over the snare drum or whatever.
Yeah,
and then you get the sides. And later you can change how wide you want.
I know
the sides.
Yeah. No, I know that.
And I decode, like I have, like that's one decoder.
Yeah.
And then these two.
Yeah.
This is for one C24, and I have another C24 that I'm going to put in my other room for that one because I realize that like for me, MS is like kind of cooler on a lot of things.
It probably also translates to mono very well in a way that you wouldn't
pull the sides down and you're in mono.
Yeah.
It's a thing to think about, like with people a lot of times with pianos, or they're like this.
Yes, space pair.
Yeah, space pair. You're like, yeah, but most people play here.
Close in the middle, yeah. And the kit also is kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
I was doing the Glyn Johns thing for a while too, which is another, I mean, it's just interesting the solutions that people have found over the years.
The thing about Glyn Johns is that you can do it, but if you're doing it for a project that you're not mixing or you're not producing, you're limiting what they can do.
Yeah.
So I've never had any complaints about like me not giving people
good material to mix.
Yeah. And I don't give them too much.
Yeah.
Like I've heard, and I've gotten, you get like 20 mics and you're just like, oh my God, I'm just going to mute half the mics.
Yeah.
So I give them very,
usable sounds.
Yeah, exactly. Like 2 kicks, two top snares.
2 top snares.
2 top snares. One's compressed, one's not.
Same mic?
No.
Let's do it. What are can we talk about it? Or
well, there's a KM84 that's not compressed. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's I don't even know.
A weird
ATM 23 or something like that. And that one you could put any mic.
Yeah. It's
just to get different frequency range. And then that one is compressed.
Yeah.
I don't use a lot of compression on really anything. I don't like to compress that much.
And
going in.
Do you have a snare snare bottom?
And then a snare bottom, rack floor, and then my close room mic, the AEA stereo, which is like that. Yeah. And then the 2 Coles, and then 1 super far mic, which probably no one ever uses.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody told me that they used it as their mic because it actually sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I just find that most people don't want room sounds anymore.
Yeah.
So they usually are like, they
using them close.
Yeah, they just have it close, and that's just generally it. And that's a great sounding room.
Yeah.
But I give everybody everything, so it's not too much, but it's what they need if they want, and usually people are pretty happy. So, but I'm not, and I don't compress overheads. I barely compress the room mics, just a little bit, because I've gotten stuff mixed, and it's like everybody like cranks the on the room mic, and I'm like, I can't use it.
Yeah.
Later on, it's easy to do that.
Yeah, but don't do it going in. Yeah, that's interesting. Because there's that fine line between making the choice in the moment, which is, I think that's been hammered at me over and over again. Like, make your decision, and at the same time, leave options.
I agree to a certain extent because I mix.
Yeah.
Like, if you mix, I think you have a different view of that. Like people put their reverb and whatever on their guitars, and it's like, but if I want it closer, I can't have it closer. Yeah. Period. Like, some people record DI on guitar and the amp because if they want to reamp later, they can reamp it later. So, because you don't always make the right choice in the beginning. Right. And compression is very dangerous. Yeah. And it can make stuff small. Yeah. It can make it punchy and it can make it really small. Yeah. And I've done it.
Both ways.
I've made stuff so small and been like, and you think about like the older guys who like have done it a really long time. Yep. Al Schmidt.
No compression. No EQ.
Compression. Yeah. And I go, oh, right. Yeah. Because you know what? Like with my drum sounds, like, oh man, you get really great drum sounds. No compression. Yeah. You don't need to.
No, I know.
You can easily do it later.
But also the thing about Schmidt and those records, and I hear it here too, is like there's a lot of headroom. There's a lot of space.
Headroom is God.
Yeah.
Headroom is, if you don't have headroom, it's just like, it's not going to give you what you want. It won't be big.
Yeah.
And it could be cool. Yeah. I'm not saying it can't be cool. Like there's a lot of indie records that I hear sometimes, I mean, these kids came into my place one time. There's a band called the Black Lips. Uh-huh. Do you know the Black Lips? No. And they're like, dude, check this out. And it sounded like they were in a rehearsal room and they had a little cassette deck, mono, and they hit record. Yeah. And I'm like, it does sound amazing. Yeah. Like it was amazing sounding.
It has a sound.
It's a sound. Yeah. But if you're recording for other people to mix, you're not doing them a disservice.
Yes.
Putting your own thing on it.
That is really interesting because I think what you're but I think you're also describing it within the context of, the sounds that you're talking about are also very dialed. Because I think what happens with us, especially those of us who are constantly living inside the box all the time, is you don't make any decisions because you want to be able to change everything.
But you can change them afterwards.
Yeah.
You can change them. You can blow up any of the kits that I give you.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Blowing up kits is easy.
Yeah.
Going back is not. Like, I've gotten, like, hey, can you mix my shit? Like, yeah,
you
sure.
Can't do
and
anything.
then and it's just like, it's this.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do you make it big? Like, it's hard to make it big. Like, you want it to sound like this, and you're giving me this.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm going to replace everything.
It's funny, though. I have a friend, an engineer friend in New York, who sometimes tells me that he gets frustrated when he gets hired to record things and other people mix it, because he's like, I record things so beautifully, especially in a jazz context, it's recorded so beautifully that whoever's mixing,
you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, the mixer's just like basically pushing faders up and using my beautiful recording.
But that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, life's not fair, and
right.
and I agree, but you'll keep on getting work.
Yeah.
If you keep on doing that stuff, you'll keep on getting work, and one day somebody's going to be like, hey, mix my record.
Of course.
And you just got to wait in line because you don't have a name that somebody else has, and it's happened to everybody.
Yeah.
It's happened to everybody. Life's not fair. The music business is really not fair. And people who have, like resumes, sometimes I hear their records and I'm like, I don't get it.
Well, I mean, it's funny when you were describing even like the way you quantize. Like, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do that too. Like, I like things to be tight, but I also like them to feel live. And I find that if I play stuff live and then I tighten up the timing, that is the sound that I like.
It's amazing.
But there are plenty of people who don't like the sound of, or will say, I don't like the quantized sound. I want it to be looser. I want to feel the time moving around. Like, that's a preference thing,
I think it depends on who's playing the drums.
Yeah.
Like, when I get people in and I'm quantizing, it's usually people who don't play drums.
Yeah. So you need to tighten them up. Yeah.
But even with Mark Guiliana, there were times when I quantized him because I wanted a rigid feel.
Sure.
Like, I wanted it to feel like electronic music.
Right.
So
and
that's
he's leaning in that already. He's like,
and he's
suggesting that already.
Do whatever you want. He's totally down.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, do I need to do it? Like, it feels different.
Yes.
So,
it does feel different.
Yeah, it feels different. But, like, I mean, there's another person who's been on many, many records. I'm not going to say his name right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I quantize. He's like, I quantize all the time, too. I'm like,
right.
And he's a drummer who gets hired a lot.
No, I tell that, I mean, to go back to where we started, our mutual friend Pete Nichelle, who hires me to play on his film score stuff, playing drums, and I'm always like, you don't want to see what happened before you got these drums.
Cares?
You don't need to see what happened.
The way what I say? People hit play and either they like it or they don't.
Yeah.
They don't care how you got there.
Yeah.
They don't care what you did. Either it's cool or it's not cool.
Yeah.
Either it makes them feel something or it doesn't. Period.
However it got there. But
however it got
all
there.
of that is to say, having strong opinions, it matters, but everybody's opinions are different. Like, you have, your sound is your sound.
Yeah.
And people are coming to you for that right now.
100%.
Pete Min.
Hope it was fun.
It was fun. It was insightful. It was eventful. And I was already excited about what you're doing, but I'm actually more excited now hearing you talk about some of the philosophy behind it. So thanks, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
There he was, my friends. Pete Min. I'll be back again soon in your headspace with my conversation featuring Brad Allen Williams, where we talk about the record he made with Pete for Colorfield and a whole lot more. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.
This has been a WBGO Studios production. To learn more about WBGO Studios' award-winning podcasts, special concerts, live streams, and more, visit wbgo.org/studios.